Hello and welcome to a special Hitchhikers Guide 42nd birthday celebration. This panel discussion is part of Blue Dot's A Weekend in Outer Space, featuring live broadcasts from the worlds of science, music and culture from Blue Dot. You can find out more and watch and listen to the rest of this weekend's activities at aweekendinouterspace.com. I'm Kevin John Davies and I'm the archivist for Hitchhikers, and I'm proud to be joined today by an array of Hitchhiker legends, including cast members, writers, co-writers, and those who knew and worked with Douglas Adams across the years, or maybe were even related to him. And so first of all, I'd like to introduce James Thrift, Douglas's half-brother and very much a keeper of the flame. And James, you must have some great memories of your big brother, and I'm sure we're going to cover some of them during this hour. So, I mean, you were just a little boy when your big brother Douglas was hammering away at the typewriter. Can you remember any little juicy bits of that era?
Oh, I mean, I was 10 when it all came out, so the start of him basically hammering away on a typewriter was very early in my upbringing down the corridor. But primarily the memory, not so much of him as he used to always listen to the same album or the same song over and over and over. So it was like Paul Simon's One Trick Pony.
Really?
Which we listen, constantly. George Harrison, My Sweet Lord. But the annoying thing for him, his turntable was precariously on a shelf on a partition wall. So you didn't actually have to close the door on the house that hard for it to jump the record, which absolutely. So I think I was probably, Hitchhikers would have come out an awful lot earlier if I hadn't actually been there, I reckon.
Well, that's just one of many excuses I'm sure that Douglas threw up for not quite being ready on time. Somebody who knows a bit more about that we're going to bring in now, and that's John Lloyd, who, legendary producer of so many programs, but we are going right back to the early days. John, you helped Douglas on the very first radio series. How long had you known him before that?
Well, I met him when we were at Cambridge together. He was in the next door college, and we were both in reviews, or trying to be in reviews. And Footlights in those days was considered a bit naff. And the cool thing was in college reviews. So I ran the one at Trinity, and Douglas was next door at St. John's. So we're kind of rivals. We used to meet at parties, and he was the year below me, so we didn't really get to know each other until we both came down and started living in London, and we became very, very good friends. I mean, absolute besties. And spent, before Hitchhiker, Douglas wanted to be a writer, and so did I, but I was so poor I had to take a job as a radio producer to at least eat. And Douglas, crashed around. He wrote with Graham Chapman, and I used to come back from producing things like the News Quiz and Quote Unquote, and then we'd write in the evenings and at weekends, and we did loads of stuff. We did a treatment for Robert Stigwood for a film about the Guinness Book of Records. All these were science fiction based because we were both science fiction nuts. We knew all of Vonnegut and all of, Harry Harrison, the Stainless Steel Rat, and then we wrote a pilot called Snow 7 and the White Dwarves, which is about two astronomers sharing an observatory at the top of Everest. And nothing really took. It was kind of a bit dispiriting, especially for Douglas. And the weird thing was that he was going to give it all up. He was going to chuck in the towel. And I came back we shared a house together with a mad guitarist whose name strangely was Gibson in Roehampton. And I came back from work, and Douglas was sitting on the bed in his room, which it was a furnished house that we'd rented, and it had 7 wardrobes in it. We never found what was in 6 of them. It was only one he kept his few clothes in, and the other 6 were all locked. And he was sitting on his bed, really close to tears, thinking, I can't do this, Johnny. I've got to go and become a shipbroker in Hong Kong, which oddly enough, he was inspired because Jeffrey Perkins had been that a few years before turning to radio production. And literally the next week, he got the commission for the pilot of Hitchhiker, and everything was on the road. So.
And the whole world changed. Can you remember that, James, that moment when it was all kicking off for Douglas?
It was a strange time because he was originally the script editor of Doctor Who, which for a 9-year-old kid was just, it doesn't come much bigger that you're living with somebody who is.
That was when I first met him. When I went and interviewed him for a fan magazine in 1978, and he was very much in the mode of, well, I've got this various things to do, I've got these scripts to do, and he was already talking about, the BBC had talked to him about an animated Hitchhiker, and he then referred to the book, and he just said, "Oh, and I've got this book to write. If only I could get the bloody thing finished." And you just think, well, with hindsight, drop everything else, Douglas, just get the book done.
Because surely he got the script editor job after Hitchhiker had come out, after the first series, indeed.
It sort of overlapped. It was very much, he took the Doctor Who job because it was a nice regular day job, which he did for a year. But during that year, it all went crazy. The album came out, there was a stage show, everything was kicking off. And of course, they talked about the television version. Talking of which, I see Sandra Dickinson. Well, welcome, Sandra. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Were you aware of Hitchhiker before you got involved in the television version?
I was, but my ex-husband had been listening to the radio, and I was asked, because I was working with Alan J.W. Bell with Roy Kinnear on The Clairvoyant around the same time, and I was asked to go along to audition for Hitchhiker. So I quickly read the book and thought it was wonderful, but I thought, I'm not going to get this because it's for an Arabic-looking woman with long dark hair, and but I went along to this audition very excited because it was an extraordinary book. And it was a very small room. And there was this giant man behind everybody else, who was Douglas. And I auditioned for it, and it was very jolly and everything, but I thought, well, that was that. And then I was offered it, so I was absolutely thrilled. Because for some reason, Douglas thought I was absolutely right for this thing that he wrote that was completely different from me.
And it also, I mean, it was defying the kind of dumb blonde role that you got cast in quite a lot. Because the Trillian is quite a smart character.
Astrophysicist, yes.
Yeah. And well, you had a physics background, didn't you, in your studies?
Well, I'm more psychoanalytic. I grew up with a very famous psychoanalyst.
Yeah.
And I studied botany at university, so it wasn't really physics. But
all right, I got that bit wrong. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it was more botany and cell biology related. But I do occasionally look up at the sky
and wonder
how we all got here, especially now. It was really thrilling to get to be a part of it.
We'll come back. We'll talk about the television a bit more later on.
Yeah.
But I'd like to go back to John to ask about writing the radio series, which is where it all began. This is what we're celebrating, 42 years since the beginning of the radio show. John, can you remember that? Because you used a bit of your book that you were writing, didn't you? Or was it another script?
Well, I don't think any of it got used, but I was trying to write a science fiction novel at the time called Gygax. And so I just said, I've got pretty stuck. You can have a look at the manuscript and see if you can find anything in it. But oddly, not because of this, I just looked up the file today, and my God, it was terrible. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, hopeless.
Not something you're going to release. Hello. There's service for you. You're being well looked after.
Yeah.
Can't get the stuff.
Yeah, so the thing is that, as is well known, Douglas was fond of missing deadlines, and he got terribly stuck about 4 episodes in, sort of 4.5 really. And he said, Johnny, can you help me out here? Because I just run out of ideas. The pressure's terrible. And as I remember it, it's so difficult. These stories are so old now, you never know how true they are. But it had taken him 10 months to write the first 4 episodes, and we knocked off the last 2 in just over 3 weeks. It was fantastic fun. There was no pain. Because, of course, once there's 2 of you, you can share all the woes and the problems and discuss them. And most comedy writing is done in 2s. It's very it's quite unusual to be a solo comedy writer. Yeah, and it was really good fun and very exciting. And I remember being there when the idea of 42 came up, and we were very, very close, as I say. And then when it all took off, which again was amazing because we all mooched into radio, where Douglas had the next office to me as a radio producer. When the first one went out, and he sort of breezily said, "Are there any reviews in the papers?" And we all laughed. He said, "Well, Douglas, if you're lucky, Gillian Reynolds gives you a mention once every 10 years in her radio column, but otherwise, not a chance, mate." And we opened all the papers because we did a lot of topical programs, the news quiz and the news headlines and things. So the papers were everywhere, all over the office. And we opened them up, and one by one, there they all were. There's a review in the Times. What the hell is going on?
It kind of exploded, didn't it? I mean,
it was unbelievably exciting, because, both of us had really put in the hours. We used to, once he got a job as a radio producer, we used to sit there in the evenings after hours writing animations, moonlighting for, we wrote two of these shows called Dr. Snuggles with Peter Ustinov in animations. But Douglas had really put in the hours. 5 years of really pushing to try and succeed, including being at university. And suddenly it was magic, that everything was going to come good. And suddenly all these publishers started calling up. I think we had 6 publishers asked us to lunch. And when you're 25 or 24, as he was, I think, it's just incredible. It's like your dream come true.
I'm going to bring in our other guest now. Phil Pope is there, who people might remember from KYTV and all the other stuff, and Heebie-Jeebies.
Yes, the Heebie-Jeebies. Yeah.
So many other things. Cheltenham 1, 2, 3, which I was there in the audience for, and Toby Longworth, who has played several characters on the radio version of Hitchhiker and on stage, including Slarty Bartfast and Wowbagger. Toby, you were a big fan, weren't you, of the radio show?
Yeah, me and Neil Sleet. I've just my wife's just given me a filling, so I still doesn't quite fit. Me and Neil Sleet, the guy who reads the news on Radio 4 and who also reads the news. I think in Hitchhikers on more than one.
He took part in Hitchhiker several times. Yeah,
he did indeed. We used to absolutely love it, and so we went. And again, it's that thing you kind of love it as a fan, and then you turn around one day and you find you're actually in it, and it's one of those kinds of hilarious turns of events. Is that the right pluralization? Turn of events? I don't know. It's one of those things that you just hope your life will include, and it did. Really.
In 2009 at the Royal Festival Hall, Owen Colfer, who wrote the 6th book, Penguin were doing a big splash for him to launch that book, and he was very excited when he arrived in the auditorium, and all the cast were there, because he said, "Finally, I can put faces to those voices that I've been living with all these years." He was genuinely very fanish about it. I'm going to ask Phil Pope. How you were moving in comedy circles at that time? Were you aware of Douglas and what was going on with Hitchhiker?
Yes, because he cast a very large shadow, physically, apart from anything else. Yes, we were very much aware, and also, of course, we were working with Jeffrey Perkins. So of course, he was really. It was very much. His day job was doing that, and with Lisa as well, sort of acting as studio manager, etc. So it was, we were all aware of what was going on, and we all knew Douglas. And of course, I was also very interested in Douglas because Douglas being so musical, and he was always we were always talking about music and that sort of thing, and he was a great fan of, as you said before, of Paul Simon, but he could also play the guitar, which was amazing. In fact, I remember years later being at a party when he had he used to collect guitars when he used to go around the world, and he was there with what's his name, David from Pink Floyd. Gilmour. David Gilmour. and he said, "Oh, Dave, I've got a new guitar." come and have a look. So we went up to this room, and there he had about 15 guitars. We had this brand new guitar, and he said, I picked it up from Manny's in New York. Anyway, yeah, here, have a go. And so David Gilmour picked it up and went, I can't play it, Douglas. And he said, well, come on, don't be so ridiculous. He said, no, it's left-handed. And of course, all of Doug's guitars are left-handed. But,
the story
anyway.
goes that he kept one, didn't he, James? He had a...
Well, he did, which David Gilmour actually, I think he sold it recently in his collection. He kept a left-handed guitar in his house, and Douglas kept a right-handed guitar in his house. So when each of them went round, they could sit and
brilliant.
They could sit and
great,
play.
Isn't it?
There was
20, you know, going from those small beginnings, he went to that kind of superstar status where he was actually up on stage with Pink Floyd playing at one of their concerts. Wasn't that?
That was his 42nd birthday present. He went up, played Brain Damage at Earl's Court, which it's kind of one of those moments where you kind of just think the effect on him was actually astonishing. He always wanted to be a rock star. And suddenly, I think after that, he actually realized that he didn't want to be a rock star, but he had been there and he'd done it. But no, that was huge for him.
It was one of the rewards of what he created, because he drew people towards him. He was very interested in meeting various other like-minded folk, and I think that was, when he started to move in those starry circles. Can you remember some of those parties that he used to throw?
Oh, it used to be the one, because we still got all these photographs. And actually, a chap here who we know who played Partially Plugged, which was, I think, the Douglas party which actually was reviewed in the Independent.
A party reviewed. I like
it was
that.
A party that was reviewed in the Independent. It was astonishing, and we were sat there trying to work out how many billionaires were in the room. And there was kind of Paul Allen, who was wandering around, who was the co-founder of Microsoft, who was completely befuddled by an extension block. He couldn't work out why we need an extension block. Surely you just go and build another wing to your house and put more plugs on the wall. Why would you want this temporary sort of thing? But to be sat there, David Gilmour, Gary Brooker, and at the time there was Wixie and Robbie McIntosh and people. So effectively Paul McCartney's backing band, and half of Pink Floyd and what have you sat in his sitting room playing. They were fantastic parties. Everything.
And I don't know if we can share some of those photographs during this. We're going to add some pictures later on. But there's lovely. There's one of Douglas utterly blissed out listening to the music, which I love.
It's and he was in a marvelous sort of thing. But yes, he was so fanatical about so many things, and whether it was like music or whether it was computers or evolution. And he was in a position that he could reach out to the greater good. So Richard Dawkins. And there's one marvelous one where he suddenly realised that he had friends who knew Gary Brooker, Procol Harum, and Douglas is an absolute Procol Harum nut. And they basically said, "Look, here's Gary's phone number. Give him a call." And he sat there for ages trying to think, "Well, how am I going to do this? I mean, I can't just phone up and say hello, hi, I'm a really big fan of yours." And so he didn't call him, and he didn't want. And eventually, Gary basically phoned him up and said, "For crying out loud, I hear you're going to call me." And they became, and again, Gary and Frankie, who became lifelong friends.
Yeah, that was when I had a meeting with Douglas. I was doing the making of Hitchhikers documentary, and I had this meeting, and he said he was off to give some kind of inspirational talk to a very elite group, and he just casually name dropped that there was going to be, I think it was George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, and the head of Sony.
Gosh.
But I loved the casual way he dropped it, in the conversation.
Little did he know that they were probably saying, we're going to be meeting Douglas Adams.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, well, look at what, Elon Musk has done with, when he fired his car, his Tesla
Yeah.
car into space.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It had "Don't Panic" on the screen, and the rumor is that there was a copy of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the glove box.
Yeah,
That's
which
what I
we
heard,
keep
yeah.
trying to get confirmation of that. But it's quite funny to
Wouldn't
say
it
the
be
people.
lovely
Oh, it'd be brilliant.
to see
But
a
the people
picture
he
of
would
it?
talk to. I do remember
Yeah.
when Douglas used to get the Digital Village and his sort of foray into the digital economy.
Yeah.
And he used to get really, really frustrated. He used to have these ideas so that if I went online to go and buy something, and they didn't have it, but wouldn't it be brilliant if you were just driving down a road and a device that obviously he didn't know about because the iPhone hadn't been invented yet, wouldn't it be brilliant? I'm driving down Upper Street for it to ping up and say, hey, do you know that album that you're really, really interested in? It's they're selling it in the shop here. And he used to drop emails to Jeff Bezos and the very, very early days of Amazon, and basically saying, wouldn't it be brilliant if, and it was only after he died and we were going through emails to actually find that the email conversations that they used to have of Jeff Bezos was basically sat there going, oh my God, I never thought about that.
But the very idea of the Hitchhiker's Guide itself, this incredible compendious device that you could get into your pocket. I mean, it's always amazed me that he's predicted that so successfully. And the prop, the TV prop, I remember, I think you're involved in that, were you, Kevin? We're trying to make it so it would, that boy,
There's
when
the
you're
prop.
trying to present
it's a duplicate, but it came from the same mold.
but to get the picture on it was quite a palaver, wasn't it?
It was. There was a 16mm projector projecting on the back of the book. The back comes off. Right, I've got a bit of foam in there now, but it's a piece of opal glass, and the projector would be shining on there. The projector was on a little trolley, and the little trolley would swivel around. It was on a long arm. Simon Jones would be holding it, and it could be moved around, and the projector would follow unerringly. I've got a little bit behind the scenes footage to show you of that.
Brilliant.
He's only looking over his shoulder, he'll down with something. Now look, you want to go to see that. I want to see that and go
That'd just be in all our pockets is one of those, and that, I think, the single most extraordinary thing about the whole Hitchhikers ethos, or the event of it, the myth, the thing of it, is that we now, all of us, have one in our pocket.
Yeah, and the way that it updates, in the
real time,
books, he was writing about it long before we had any idea that this would be the case.
But the really sad thing is that he died before any of it came out. He didn't see an iPad. Yeah. He didn't see an iPod. He didn't see an iPhone. He didn't see an iPad. All the things. And he would have been
a great advocate for it, and he would have been championing the technology as soon as it arrived. I'm
Absolutely.
sure.
I remember having over lunch years ago with a few people, and Douglas saying, wouldn't it be great if you could actually watch a television program when you wanted to watch it? And we sort of say, well, no, and I was say, well, things like the FA Cup final, you don't want to do that. Everyone wants to have a shared experience. And there used to be a program called, Did You See? Even, it was one of the first eating TV type of things. And I sort of said, well, it's just because, you can't work out, the VCR's just come out and you can't work out how to do it, Douglas. I mean, if you just worked out how to do that, you'll be fine. Even if, because he was going around the world on these sort of book tours and he was missing out on all these programs. But of course, actually, it was a much more visionary thing that he was saying.
I have a little clip of Douglas talking about it in 1995 and how he was,
listen to that.
Even then, he was an advocate for getting this country completely wired up. Long time ago.
There's another interesting thing about the technology, that the fact that he was ahead of the technology all the time, because when he first started becoming really well known as a writer, nobody knew what he looked like because there wasn't Google, there wasn't Wikipedia. You couldn't just look somebody up. And so very, very few people so you could sit on planes and things and have conversations with people, and they would have no idea who he was. And he used to love that. He said it was great fame because you'd be anonymous in the pub. But if you want to say, somebody says, what do you do? So I write science fiction books. Oh, really? What's your name? I'm Douglas Adams. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. There's a famous story of him being on a plane to Chicago, and he got talking to this guy who was a massive fan. And he said, well, hey, Douglas, you got to come to a party. We got a party, and gave him the address. So Douglas turned up to this massive gated community on the lakeshore, and rang the doorbell at the apartment. And he said, the guy opens the door and he goes, yeah? And Douglas says, I'm Douglas Adams. And the guy goes, oh my God, you're Douglas Adams. Hey, everyone, Douglas Adams is here. Man, this is so great. There's a great party. And eventually he sort of says, wondering where his host is, the guy who invited him, where's Phil? And the guy says, he lives upstairs. He comes to the wrong party.
Sandra, do you remember the launch, or not launch, but the rap party that Douglas threw after the final day of Hitchhikers on telly? Do you remember going to Douglas?
I remember going to parties at his house. I don't remember that particular one. I just remember going to his house with the very high ceilings. And Gilmore was there. There were a lot of famous people there. I went to one of the parties about the time my marriage was about to implode. So that was a bit stressful. But but it was lovely, going to them because, it seems like everybody who was there was famous for something.
And he liked the high life, didn't he? Because one of his great things while you were making the TV series was he loved a good food guide.
Yeah, and we drove all over Cornwall, going to all these wonderful restaurants. At the end of the day's filming, they'd throw me into makeup and do my hair for tomorrow's shoot, and I'd put this scarf on, a bit like a sort of babushka, and off we'd go into the night to these wonderful restaurants.
In his VW Golf.
Yeah. Oh, God, it was almost like a secret life I was leading, along with my own quotidian. But he was just this huge life force in every sense, wasn't he?
He was. I've got a nice photograph that we could pop in here of you with Douglas on the set. You're on that turntable set that was the Heart of Gold control room, and Douglas is standing there chatting to you. And then, of course, in order to get him out of the way, the producer would stick him behind the scenery so that he could do the voice of Eddie the computer to feed you lines. And I think it was the producer's way of just getting him out of the way.
Yeah. No, we almost kind of linked up at one point when we were both single, and then he was just so tall, I thought I could never really reach him somehow. and his brain was sort of 6'4" up there, minus the top one. He was always sort of distracted by, otherworldly things somehow. So, but we were great, dear friends. I'm listening to all this and thinking, oh my God, I never thought of that. It was, I felt like just a sort of small cog in the entire universe of Hitchhikers. And I was I came in very late to it.
So you had quite a saucy costume, which in the script, Douglas was very specific that he wanted it to be a little bit unseemly.
Yeah, somebody brought it recently, because although I wasn't in the original radio, I have been in a lot of the subsequent, recorded variations of it. And somebody brought the costume to this photo shoot, maybe a couple of years ago. And I thought, there's no way. Yeah, I thought there's no way I'm going to get in that. It would sort of go on my thigh now, because I was a good deal slimmer in those days. I'm determined to get back to that, but probably be on my deathbed. Yeah, it was, and Kevin showed me some pictures recently, and I thought, oh my God, I was amazing. Because when you're in that mode, you think, I'm rather plain, and I don't have this and I don't have that. And now I see it now, I think I should have been conquering the world.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating to listen to all your stories because, as I say, I had a very small focus to learn the lines and do them on the first take and behave myself and just count myself so lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, and you came back to the radio series later on.
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
When Trillian was infatuated with Wowbagger, rather improbably. Toby?
What do you mean improbably?
Well, what a love story that was.
Yeah, it was two hearts cleft to twain, finally.
Yeah, it was radio, let's face it.
You had to snatch it away.
I went to one reading of the original script at the Geographical Society, and I was invited to come along. And then Susan Sheridan was introduced as, and now the real Trillian. And I thought, well, that was a bit of a below the belt. You know what I mean? I mean, we're all real variations of, you know what I mean? I thought, well, I shouldn't have come, really.
Yeah.
And then when they began to weave us together in the interpretation of the part, I must say I did get rather confused as to who I was.
Well, I think it was lovely because Douglas clearly wrote that idea into the 5th book, the last Hitchhiker book that he wrote, the idea of 2 Trillians. And it was clear from the description that you were the other Trillian.
Yeah, when we did
the real Trillian.
The real Trillian, yeah, depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah, when we did the recent British Library reading of it, I did try to pay a bit of homage to Susan by doing it in a slightly more English accented reading than my actual TV appearance.
But Phil and Toby, this really, the live performance of Hitchhiker, you've both taken parts in various live shows. What's it like to do this kind of material to an audience? Because, you know, usually it's a radio thing or a TV thing is kind of made in isolation. But when you've got the crowd out there, what was that like? Got any memories of the live shows?
I always thought it was a bit like what it must have felt like, maybe a version of Monty Python Live at the Hollywood Bowl, because everybody's really they're singing along with the sketches.
Yeah.
I mean,
I remember the 2009 show at for the Pan anniversary at the festival hall.
Yes.
Rosie, my wife, was in the audience with 1 or 2 of my children, and at the end of it, I said, how did it go? Did you enjoy it? And she said, yeah, but it was a bit weird because, you know, everyone in the audience was speaking the lines with you. She said, I felt rather left out.
Yeah. When we were on tour, we had a different book, different reader for the book. John, of course, read the book very, very elegantly, more than one occasion. But we had different ones, and different people had different levels of familiarity with the script. And sometimes if one of the books wasn't familiar with a word or a pronunciation of a planet or something, the audience were quite quick and eager to correct any mispronunciations or anything like that. It was quite entertaining.
They were talking about doing another run at the stage show again recently, weren't they?
Yes,
I think so. Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah,
I think
but unfortunately, that was all sort of, you know, the current pandemic has put paid to that for the time being.
Yeah.
Never say never.
As an anniversary thing, but you know, you never know. But I mean, the great thing about doing the show live was just the warmth that came back from the audience, and the reaction was just extraordinary. I mean, it was like a rock concert, really.
Totally.
It was, and so it was. And the audience were just with you, and it wasn't just all, you know, Hitchhikers fans, you know, the original Hitchhikers fans. And I think there were people, and what the great thing was that people were bringing their, you know, their family, their children, their grandchildren, even.
Yeah.
And so it was a real occasion, and it was good fun. And
Marvin was a huge hit with the kids. I remember because I shot some Vox Pops after one of the tours in 2012, 2013. And the children were absolutely in love with Marvin. Now, I think we should pay a little tribute here to, obviously, we've mentioned Susan Sheridan, but Stephen Moore was the original and you know, best Marvin, let's be honest. He you know, he was stunned when at the 2008 30th anniversary of Hitchhikers at the Royal Geographical Society, when he said Marvin's first line, it brought the house down.
Mm.
There were cheers and everything, and he talked about it afterwards. He was quite touched by that, and suddenly realised how much this character meant, because he said,
we'd had him on tour on tape with us, so he didn't come on tour, but he was on tape
yes,
with
he
us.
wasn't available,
Like,
and luckily I went and filmed when Dirk Maggs, you know, the great Dirk, who was adapted everything of recent times. He recorded Stephen because Stephen wasn't going to be available for the Hitchhiker tour, and we got really Stephen's final ever performance as Marvin that day. And of course, the recording went on to have a life beyond. It's been used, and it was used at the live show, the
BBC, yeah.
At the what memories we got of that?
Well, that was amazing, because I was doing the voice of the book.
Yeah,
You were
doing whatever. It's complete live radio. It's one of the most exhilarating things ever.
that countdown at the beginning to the moment when it was going live. That was
because
quite
I hadn't done live radio since Douglas and I worked together in radio. I used to do a 2-hour live show on Radio 2 called Late Night Extra, which is the adrenaline pumping is really amazing.
I was going to say, John, there have been several people that have read the book, the voice of the book, for various radio shows. Obviously, Peter Jones, the first one, and
Bill Frank.
I did a little video with him for when we premiered the TV series episode 1. They needed like a little warm-up video, so I popped up from under his desk and he demonstrated how to wear the headphones off one ear, because they wanted to record the laughter track, you know. But Peter was fantastic, and he read it with that slightly bemused. You weren't really sure whether he got what he was saying, but he delivered it with panache.
He always claimed never to understood a word of it, so
yes.
he was very I think he did understand it, but
yeah. And then William Franklin took over,
William.
and he admitted at first that he didn't get it, but he practiced it quite a bit, and he used to play recordings to Dirk while he was rehearsing it at home. And he said that Douglas's words were like surfing the waves at Bondi Beach, which is where he grew up. You just hang on for dear life to the end of the sentence.
yeah, this is so true, Kevin. I mean, when I did the hexagonal phase book, which I did with Dirk Maggs, all in one day, all 6 episodes, and
Wow.
these sentences, they come at you, and I mean, these words, you know, quiggle, quoggle, quoggle, you know, just out of nowhere. So I didn't have any rehearsal, and it's absolutely draining. And anyway, I went away, and Dirk phoned up the next day and said, "Don't you got the voice quite right? Can you come and do it again?" So and I thought it was just me, but he said they were all exactly the same. Everyone else said these are impossible paragraphs to read. It's really a test.
I watched William Franklin go through it in what was that, 2005 or 2003 when he first did it, and it was exactly the same sort of struggle with the whole rhythm and the flow, and but you know, nailed it. And so did you. I watched you struggle with it for the hexagonal phase, but you got there.
Good direction from Dirk is just don't try so hard, just do it and
let it flow.
You don't try and be Peter Jones or Bill or Stephen Fry for that matter. It's just to let the words speak for themselves, and then it all comes good.
Could we talk a bit about the different adaptations that there have been, and that you might have witnessed as viewers or as listeners? You know, has anyone got anything to say about the books versus the television versus the movie?
I was thinking the first 2 books. I think they're really amazing pieces of work. I think they're particularly those. I know people real fans usually say the radio's the thing, but for me, the books they're just kind of masterpieces, really. And it's actually, you know, because as is again probably well known, Douglas gave me the sack after the first series, and we booked this holiday in Corfu together, and so he was the great novelist sitting up on the hill on the terrace, and I was the drunk in the taverna but on the beach. And we spent a month together with him trying to write this book. And it was fascinating because the first draft was actually Kurt Vonnegut. You know, it was a Kurt Vonnegut book. And I said, you can't do this, Douglas. You haven't caught your own voice. So he started all over again. And it's one of those things, you know, at the time, being sacked by your best friend is not an amusing experience particularly. But once you see the work, you think, oh, I understand this now. You know, the pain is necessary to produce something that good. Because actually, I'm a great believer in this. I think nothing great is ever achieved without tremendous struggle. I can certainly say that about my television productions, for example. People who say, oh, it went great. It was such fun. We all had just a huge laugh. You think that's not going to be any good.
Yeah.
It's got to be difficult at some point. And I think that, you know, I always felt that, you know, at the time, you know, Douglas was making a mistake. And ever since I thought, no, it has made him an immortal, and it's kicked my ass to go off and do something different, you know, do something of my own.
It's one of those things that you always hear. If people say that they had fun making a thing, you always go, oh, Christ, this is going to be awful, this, isn't it? It's always that.
Well, it's a bit like someone coming out of an exam and saying, oh, I think I did really well.
Yeah, I aced it.
I felt about the film that it was just too overproduced. It had kind of lost that collegiate sort of charm, you know, undergraduate charm.
Didn't quite get to the sense of humor either, I feel.
No, it was just most un-British, I thought, speaking as an American Brit. But I just thought it lost its charm, really.
Well, again, it wasn't Douglas, was it? It wasn't there, you know.
No,
they lost his voice. That was the thing. I think that the script, I think the visuals were fantastic. And I know that the Hammer and Tongs, the producer and director, they really had Douglas's best interest at heart, but they didn't really have. I think the studio controlled what happened to the script.
Yeah,
So they messed with the dialogue. I think that's the only thing I can say about it. I loved some of the visuals.
Misunderstanding what you mean by the end of the universe, as the most.
That was.
Well, there was one version. Every now and again, when Douglas used to come back from America, and come and stay, and it was the accepted thing that we didn't mention the film until he did.
Right.
This is this is going back for decades almost. And the one time when he walked in and you could tell that there was something was seriously wrong. But again, you don't mention the film. If he mentions it, we'll go there. If he doesn't mention it, we don't go there at all. And that was one when Disney suggested that maybe we could delay the blowing up of the Earth until the end of the film. Basically, because we wanted to get absolutely everything, the build up, the relationships to the moon on, and all ending in this catastrophic, massive explosion. And
that movie, the history of that movie. So I remember when it first came up, Douglas and I, he was trying to pitch it and he'd taken Donna Summer's beach house in Malibu for the summer. This had been 82, and he was pitching this movie, and we'd had this idea for writing The Meaning of Life. So he said, Johnny, I'm really sorry to do this, but I can't make the meeting. You couldn't come out to Malibu, could you, for a month? Oh, I don't know. All right. Yes. All right. Will. And
only if it's Donna Summer's house, I can't.
It wasn't
Donna Summer's summer house, was it?
Yeah. It was
Larry Hagman lived next door.
In Malibu colony. It was an amazing time. And he'd go off in the day and he'd come back. He'd tell these terrible stories about meeting some sort of dwarfish guy with an enormous cigar for lunch, And this guy, one guy said to him, "Oh, Dougie, what should I call you? Dougie, Doug, or Douglas?" And Douglas said, "Douglas, please." And he said, "Okay, Dougie. We're gonna have a little something to eat and a little something to drink, and then we're gonna talk about what kind of animal you like to sleep with." That was the kind of milieu he moved in. And he kept over all those years. What is it? God, 20 or more years. Not 20 years, but however long it was, struggling to find the right director and the right producer, and he never really hooked up. It was very, really sad that he didn't bring it off, really.
Yeah. I think what you said about Hammer and Tongs, who at the time were actually living, they made commercials. And the one thing that they were fantastic on was creating amazing effects, amazing visuals without Hollywood money.
Yeah, music videos was where they shone. Yeah,
and they were actually at the time. The office was a barge, which was like a quarter of a mile from Douglas's house, around the corner. And going and when you went into the art department on the Heart of Gold, you never saw it on the film. The front of the Heart of Gold was this ring, and looking at it close up, the detail of basically all the things about Douglas's life were included in it. The love that these guys put into it was absolutely massive.
It's meant to look like a cup of tea, wasn't it?
Yeah, but on the film, nobody saw. And then the visuals when they with Slarty Bartfast, when they go onto the factory floor of Magrathea, and so they go through the tunnel and they come out on the the extending arm that just goes and goes and goes. The artwork. The fanatical attention to detail. But the thing that always got me, you're saying that when you actually went and watched the live shows, and you suddenly realised that all those people around were, a word was wrong, they were in there. All of Douglas's words, everything that made, and even now, every 5 minutes, Douglas's, all his little phrases which were made for Twitter, these little snapshots, which appear all over the place, were completely missing from the film. Almost that that vision of Douglas, it wasn't there, and I think that was more the studio rather than hammer and tongs.
Because essentially it was the text which was the most important, and where it all sort of stems.
And it was their first feature film. They'd made some really successful music videos with brilliant imagery in them. But of course, that doesn't involve any dialogue, and I think they had quite a heavy hand from above, from the Disney execs.
There's not been an iteration. There hasn't been an iteration in which it hasn't brought something to the table, whether it be the visuals of the film or I remember very clearly the book. I think you had a part in Kevin, the illustrated.
The illustrated, I have it here.
Yeah, you got that. So I remember seeing that in a book.
Can you see that?
Just being fascinated by the pictures, and it's very few iterations of the project.
We had a very lovely Marvin. I was very proud.
Yeah, it's really good at the Marvin. Yeah, I like that Marvin.
Yeah, that was made by a friend of mine, John Saville, and just a beautiful piece of work. All sorts of things in there. There have been so many people. There's also another character we should mention, who's a regular Hitchhiker contributor on the casting side. There's Mike Kuehl as Mr. Prosser. Who was the Vogon guard on the television version, and he's been your sidekick, Toby. What's it like playing Vogon, Captain Jeltz?
It's great.
You played him in various different versions, haven't you?
Yeah, I've taken up the Jeltz reins from Bill Wallace, wasn't it, who played it originally?
Yeah, who did it originally, yeah.
And I actually weirdly found out only a few years ago that I lived like 3 doors down from him in Bath. We both lived in the Royal Crescent, Bath. And so we kind of like, one day he stopped being Jeltz and I started being Jeltz, and it's just moved a couple of doors down the...
You've made him a lot more, what's the word? Bit rougher. Bit more
I think he's closer to, well, I have in my mind, he's closer to what he looks like than what he, you mean. He's, I wanted the poetry to come out of the kind of person that would make that kind of poetry. That's what I used as a steer.
Yeah, and you had Mike Kuehl as your sidekick in which radio series was it? The Quintessential, I think.
Quintessential, I think, and at the British Library.
The British Library,
yeah. And the British Library, yeah. And who else did you have? Well, Dirk's son, Tom.
Oh yeah.
Was playing Constant Moan.
Constant Moan, and I think
we've got a bit of footage of you doing that sequence. We might drop a snippet in here.
Whack a bit in there.
Now the Earthlings are defenceless. Mind you, that torpedo was rubbish. I was expecting a proper bang, the mother of all explosions. Thop, I ask you.
A prosthetic, sir. A thought. Rather than another quest, why don't I fire 6 low-yield warheads? That should be enough to vaporise the Earthlings. After all, it would be within our remit to confiscate the planet these people purchased.
Gunner, that is a fine suggestion. Why don't you pull your chair a little closer to me? I believe I would like to rub your head.
My greasy crown would be honoured, sir.
There now.
Oh, lovely. Sir, thank you.
You paying attention, Constant? That's how your green nose.
Oh my God.
Tell me, what is the history of Dirk Maggs? I mean, he's become this extraordinary writer. He started out as a drummer, right?
Well, as a studio manager, he was for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And producer, yeah. No, his drumming his
Incidental.
legendary drumming is basically a side thing.
Oh,
it's a
I see.
sideline.
Of course, he did play the drums, in the live show, and of course he
Yes.
was,
Oh.
because of him and Simon Jones. Without them, the live show would not have happened.
He's very much the, along with James, of course, the keeper of the flame. He's
Yeah, and
been the
along with you,
mastermind
Kevin.
behind so many versions in the
Kevin,
last
you're
20
a
years.
keeper of the flame.
Thank
I
you.
remember when you were about your son's age
Yes.
in
Well, I was
rehearsals.
even younger. I was 19 on the set of
No,
Hitchhikers.
you're very much one of the stalwarts of the keeper
Yeah,
of
I
the flame.
remember taking pictures of you crawling around on the floor looking for your mice.
And also, Kevin, I just want to say, present company accepted, your work's the best thing in the television show, because I was, as you know, associate producer. I wasn't allowed on the set. I wasn't allowed anywhere near it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, you were busy with the fantastic Not the 9 o'clock news, which I adored. You were probably in a studio next door. I'm pretty sure on one occasion you were. And,
I was instrumental because it was going well. I went to my head of department and I told him about Hitchhiker, which he'd never heard of. And he said, that sounds interesting. Should we commission a script? So that's how it started. And then they wouldn't let me produce it
Ah,
because they said, that guy, he'll get far too cocky if he has another hit. If he has two. No.
they were
But
keeping you back.
when your first graphics came in for the book,
Yeah.
it's just that you solved a problem that I didn't know how anyone was going to do. It was amazing. And again, way ahead of its time.
yeah,
Well,
they've
I was
really
very
influenced.
lucky. I might as well tell that little story. I was in a very lucky position that I'd been in the job a couple of months, a little animation studio in West London, and I heard R2-D2 bleeping down the corridor. And I went into the area that I shouldn't have gone in. It was overflow cutting rooms from the BBC rented a few cutting rooms there. And I met Alan Bell by sheer fluke because he was cutting a film for Jim Will Fix It. Now notorious. And it was a little boy on the set of The Empire Strikes Back meeting R2-D2 and Luke Skywalker. And that's what led me down there. And he said, are you a science fiction fan then? And I said, yes. And he said, have you heard of something called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Well, I'd already interviewed Douglas for a fanzine. I'd already been to the stage show the year before. I was all, I bubbled on for 5 minutes. And once I shut up, I said, oh, yeah, I understand there's going to be a TV show. And he said, there is, and I'm going to produce it. So I introduced him to my boss, the genius Rod Lord, in the studio next door where I worked. And about 10 days later, he came back with a script and had a formal meeting. And after the graphics department got a bit grumpy because they'd already budgeted to do it, and their budget was twice what Rod had quoted, we landed the job. And then Douglas came to view the first half of the Babelfish sequence. And that was it. Signed, sealed, delivered. It was definitely our gig.
You certainly still see that influence, those graphics nowadays. It absolutely.
A lot of people, the lettering running in, which and then added all the little bleeps. And
it definitely is very much part of the kind of computer lingua franca. I think that's what people think of.
The style was pinched for commercials and all
all over.
They still do it a little bit now. And I thought when they did the movie, I thought they did quite well because they had to make it international. The TV graphics all those years ago that we did had a lot of type that we tried to make a blizzard of information on the screen. Too much. It was almost the first program made for people who had freeze frames on their video.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's something I wanted to do, a program that would have that in it. Yeah. And Lee and Herring did it, and I was like, damn, they got there first, but they only ever did it as a result of having seen all that information going on, and you could just go through it bit frame by frame, which me and Neil sleep all the time.
It was groundbreaking.
The movie did very well to make it more international by not relying on type. There was very little anything on the screen that was actually, the English language, because they wanted it to go international.
But
so they became
visual...
like road signs, like the international road signs.
Yeah.
They were symbolic, and I thought I quite enjoyed it. They were made by a company called Shinola. But the TV graphics is all down to, and he won a BAFTA for it. My boss, Rod Lord at Pierce Studios. I'm still very proud of that. It was a brilliant year for me as my first year in the business.
I bet the people in the film made use of some sort of computer, whereas you were using actual gel and animated.
It was cutting it all up, and I can show you a little snippet of video on that as well.
Mind-boggling. Oh yeah, stick that in. That's mind-boggling.
Also, every now and then, Rod Lord sticks, some of the original graphics on eBay.
Really?
And the demand for them. Every now, and there's always, I love it the way it's sort of, that the condition used, a little bit of sellotape, worn or sellotape on it,
That's right,
where it's all been stuck. And I had a friend of mine who's one day, and he said, I'm going to sit and wait because one day I'm going to pick up one of those cheap. It's like, no, you won't.
No, there's no way.
No, you won't. No.
I noticed that if I post one of his links on a forum, and there's a couple of the Hitchhiker forums or Facebook pages, the price goes rocketing up.
Yeah.
He's got his regular mailing list.
I mean, those.
I'm going to do a plug for it. Rodlord.com. If you want some original
piece of history.
TV series artwork. Yeah.
It's a piece not just of Hitchhiker's history, though, and I think that's what I really trying to, the visual element, but also the conceptual element of the whole Hitchhiker's ethos. That's the word I'm working for. Ethos has shaped the way we use computers, and the computer in our pocket. And all of that kind of thing is its first step was being delineated and described by Douglas. And so the world we now live in, for good or ill, was his idea. And
I remember Douglas. I mean, he was a as we all know, he was a Mac guru, wasn't he? He was an
Apple master.
Apple master. Beg your pardon.
He was an Apple used to send them off around the world to basically preach preach, and there was loads of them. There was him.
Stephen Fry was he as well?
Stephen Fry was, but he kind of didn't go around so much. Muhammad Ali was one. Loads of Hollywood guys, and so he would then be flown off to go and talk at an Apple event.
Good grief!
And it was crazy that none of them were paid, and at the end of it, they would just be given to like a new bit of kit.
Oh my God, though! Brand new.
And it was daft at the time. Those sort of Sun Microsystems were paying him $75,000 to go and stand on a cruise ship and give a talk for 2 hours, and Apple got it for free, for giving him a little bit of kit or what have you, purely because they all just evangelize. They love the kit. They love.
I know. I wanted to ask. When did you ever remember when Douglas moved from typewriter to computer? And did anybody notice a difference? Was anybody there? That moment.
I remember him showing me the original Apple Mac. The 128K or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates famously said,
you'll never need more.
Yeah. No one will ever need more than 128K. And seeing this computer and Douglas saying, this is going to revolutionize the world. And I sort of looked at it and thought, well, basically a typewriter, isn't it, with a screen?
Yeah.
but of course, we shared, we talked about this, that we had this sort of love of music. But of course, Douglas was always, I was the professional composer, but he always had the most fantastic kit. He always had sort of much better kit than I did. He was very generous, though. I mean, he would, if he was going off on a world tour or something, and I remember once saying to him, "Look, Douglas, my computer's broken. I don't know what to do." And he said, "Okay, well, I've got a 2 CE. You could have that for a couple of months or something." So this was, I said, "Well, can I just use it?" And he said, "Yes. I mean, just don't touch anything on it." And then I was amazed that he had about 200 apps, and this was in about 1982 or something. It was like, Well, I didn't even know these things existed. But he had the music, the stuff. He had the most extraordinary collection of music stuff as well. Anyway, so yes, he was really at the forefront of these things. And I remember him showing that computer, that
his
box.
house at in Duncan Terrace in Islington, which he kind of bought as a shell. And completely gutted it and turned it into this amazing place. And as well, I think when he was off with Mark Corwardine going off around the world making Last Chance to See, and he was turning the top floor, which was going to become his kind of study playroom. And I always remember this marvelous one that the electrician who phoned up and basically said, "There's something wrong here. Can we get hold of Douglas?" And was just saying, "Well, no, because I think he's in Guatemala, Patagonia, in the middle of nowhere. What's the problem?" And he just said, "Well, I've got it down here that I'm supposed to put 58 sockets into this cupboard." that can't possibly be right. And we sort of went, that's his music cupboard. That's basically, so there's cupboard doors when you open it up, and that's where all the sampling, all this wall of racks of stuff and the keyboards. Yeah, that's about right.
Just 58. Yeah,
it's 58. Yeah, 58 sockets in one cupboard. Yeah.
Phil, your contribution in recent times to the music, you were picking up the mantle, created by Paddy Kingsland all those years ago.
I hesitate to be mentioned in the same breath.
But you were playing live as well, so you were preparing cues. And can you tell us a bit about that, the live music side of it? The stage tour and the
live music was. Dirk, to his credit, was very, he's very particular and very keen to keep, as Toby says, the ethos and the whole sort of flavor of the original and Douglas's vision of it. Because Dirk, had been talking to Douglas about doing the radio series back in the 90s or what have you. The books 3 and 4, this series 3 and 4. So when we did the stage show, we talked about what sort of music it should be, and we wanted to try and have a flavor of this is a conversation I had with Dirk, and I remember very clearly him talking about what sort of music would Douglas have wanted or might have wanted. So we wanted to keep a flavor of the radiophonic workshop stuff if possible, the Paddy Kingston stuff, but also to try and make it as of now, was it was then in 2012 or whatever it was, but also to try and have some the sort of music that Douglas liked. So, and that's why we started it with One of These Days by Pink Floyd, because he was a big Pink Floyd fan, but also there were one or two pieces in the Voice of the Book passages and those sort of things. So I thought, well, Douglas was a great fan. Well, fan's the wrong word. He was a great admirer of J.S. Bach. So there was one piece in particular which was called Space, where I sort of tried to write something which was a sort of like a
riff,
a prelude or something by Bach, which obviously wasn't, but and so it was that sort of thing where we tried to sort of get a sort of melange of all those things, trying to get the new technology, trying to get a flavor of the original radio series, but also a little bit of what Douglas, liked as well.
Well, we've covered many of the different versions of Hitchhiker. We're going to have to wrap it up in a few moments. There was due to be a new series being shot at Elstree around about now. It was all being set up, and then, of course, the coronavirus epidemic occurred and everything got put on hold. I understand that series is still due to go ahead. I wish them luck with it. I wonder what they'll do. How's that going to be? What do you think is going to be the future, the kind of legacy of Douglas and the future for Hitchhiker? Can you imagine another version in the years to come when we're all gone?
But are they shooting a new Hitchhiker?
Yeah, it's a television series.
Television series.
Hulu.
Hulu. Who knew?
Did Disney.
I know Disney, but do you know who the director is or producer?
It's Google it, but it's
That's
the only way you'll find out.
I haven't got the notebook to hand.
Yes, I think it was sort of announced last year or something, wasn't it? They were talking
but it
about
was all booked into
There's a couple of big Hitchhiker fans, I think, who are behind it. I think.
Yeah, nobody's phoned me yet, so I'm not.
They will.
They will, you know.
No one's phoned me either, but they will.
Yeah, exactly. If they haven't phoned you, I doubt they'll phone me. Yeah.
Well, I hope they find somebody who can pick up the mantle of Simon Jones and well, first of all, Geoffrey McGivern, who came back to the role in the radio series after many years. I think we realised that talking to Dirk that it was Hitchhikers was at its best when Ford and Arthur are together going through the adventure. There's essentially a sort of buddy thing between them, and Simon and Jeff bounce off each other so well. In the TV series, it was David Dixon. I don't know who we're going to get next, but I think, and I hope you'll agree, I mean, the books are going to be there forever. Whatever other versions may yet to come, I hope they're as successful as all the versions that all of you took part in. And I've got to wrap this up now.
No, it's been fascinating, actually.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I feel like a fan.
Yeah,
I am.
I feel like a fan. Bring me two.
I'll try and get you one. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we've got to stop talking about apples before we become pumpkins.
Well, look, thanks to all of you for your time and for taking part.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Fascinating discussion. We look forward to seeing you at Blue Dot next year, hopefully. Because it all got cancelled this year, they have talked about doing a Hitchhiker 42nd anniversary a year late next year. But I hope we get to do something. Maybe
the world
we'll
will be virtual from now on. The whole world will be virtual. We're never going to meet each other ever again.
Sort of meaning to the words, we'll phone it in.
Yeah.
But
I have to wear trousers.
Yeah, I'm in a hot tub now. I mean, I'm not even...
we'll all meet at the restaurant at the end of the Zoomiverse.
Yeah. On that note,
I've got to say thanks to everyone, all of you, for tuning in at home. Blue Dot returns to Jodrell Bank on the 22nd to the 25th of July, 2021. If you'd like more information on the Blue Dot Festival and Blue Dot's universe of music, science, and cosmic culture, visit discoverthebluedot.com. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Lovely to see you guys. Bye.